Hello everyone and welcome to a new edition of GameTales, the show where we talk for quite a long time about a couple of very important things near and dear to our hearts. And today's topic is that of reviewing, so buckle down because it's going to be probably a very long episode. And again I'm joined by Steven from the channel Steven Nonsense. Hi Steven!
Hello Unicom and good morning, afternoon to our listeners. How's everybody doing? I hope fine.
They probably are, unlike our internet. For those who probably are not aware of this is take 2 of the show.
Yep, well, no one's aware of this, just you and me.
Well, now they are. Thankfully, we did not get too far into it before we started take 2.
Yes, but you have to recognize that it always works better on the second take. It's the intro is smoother.
Yeah. So today's topic is that of reviewing, so I'm gonna ask this question again of you, and hopefully this time I'll actually hear your answer. Steven, when did you start reviewing things and why?
I started reviewing. I started my reviewing quote-unquote career on the internet by doing movie reviews, and I did this because I was inspired by a particular movie that had a big impact in my life, and by a particular cult movie community that I was part of many years ago. This was a website called Mutant Reviewers from Hell, and I was a part of the message board there. This was still in the time when those things were a thing, and you could actually be part of a nice niche community without, a lot of trolling. This was a time before Twitter. So I would go there to find out information about movies I was interested in, but I really couldn't find stuff about cult movies, things like The Evil Dead, Army of Darkness, Kevin Smith movies. And after spending like a year or two there reading things, I tried my hand at actually writing a review for a movie that really impacted me at that time, and up until now, including. It's one of those movies, one of those pieces of art which, if you absorb them at the right time or at the proper time in your development, then they change something with you about your personality, about your character. They change you as a person. And that movie is called Waking Life. So that's how I started making reviews in written format, and then I discovered I kind of like writing. This whole video shit came much later. You?
Well, I sort of started around the year 2003 or something like that. At high school, when we were getting close to graduating, we had to make a project. I actually forgot what it was called, the bit. I think you may have done it too, like at the end to make a... I don't know what the project was. We had to make a project at the end of the year. So my idea was to create a website on which I would talk about video games. Now, this was a bit of a challenge for me because then I did not have internet. I was barely, familiar with the concept of it, with how it worked and why. But I had visited some sites before, like the Level site, and I had a Level magazine. So I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to do something similar. And I came up with the website GameLore, of which I would show you pictures of, but it's on a CD, and I don't have a CD drive on this one. So
What was it called?
GameLore.
I like that. We should use that, or I might just steal
Probably.
that. I might just steal that for a show.
You have my blessing.
Good. Or it's probably, if we search GameLore now on YouTube, there's probably 431 channels with sub 50 subscribers, and who knows how many websites and other Twitter handles with the name. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Well, there's a Games Lore Ltd, which is about board gaming. It's a store, I think, from the looks of it.
Close enough.
And there are game lore videos made by TG, and that's the Gaming Network or something on YouTube. So, but I don't think it's actually a channel. But anyway, as part of game lore, I would write reviews to things. Not a lot of things. The main thing I reviewed was Anachronox, which is a game that I really enjoyed back then. It was a really quirky sort of Western approach at the JRPG, because the combat, the structure of it, the way the characters were sort of presented and introduced, it was structured like a JRPG, but it wasn't one. It was very, very weird. It was made by Ironstorm, the same Ironstorm that brought us Daikatana. Not the one that brought us Deus Ex, the one that brought us Daikatana. But it was started by, what's his name? Goddamn, I forgot his name. See? Memory leaks, people. Memory leaks. The older you get, the quicker you forget people's names.
But hopefully you don't forget their achievements, so...
Tom Hall, yeah, Tom Hall, I keep forgetting, yeah. Tom Hall, and he was very creative. Like he made Commander Keen before Anachronox, and he got the idea of, oh, let's give Doom a story where there's 4 Marines and they do things and there's dialogue, and they didn't put any of that in the game, so we went on to make Rise of Triad. But when he made Anachronox, he pretty much stuffed everything that could fit into a game in there. You had the future, it was space, you had space travel, you had time travel.
Cyberpunkish, it was also kind of cyberpunk.
Cyberpunkish bits. You had a planet filled with former communists that recently won their democracy and were now obsessed with democracy to the point where they voted for everything and nothing was ever done because of it.
Yeah, that's the problem with one of the problems. I mean, with what's the name? It's a name. That type of democracy has a particular title, as opposed to what we generally have now, which is a representative democracy. That is direct. It's called direct democracy.
Yeah, it was everybody voted for everything constantly.
That's a recipe for gridlock, unless
there is one thing they agreed upon. There is one thing they agreed upon, which was shrinking the planet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They agreed upon shrinking the planet so it'll follow you around, your character, and help him save the universe. So the planet was a playable character, and it was also a universe that had superheroes in the comic book sense. They talked with word balloons.
Well, that's special.
Yeah. And that one of these superheroes becomes one of your party members. It was a really weird game that sadly didn't get a sequel, though it needed one badly because it ends on a mother of a cliffhanger. Like, oh.
See, this was yet another title that you should have added into your video about reboots and remakes that has literally nothing to do with reboots or remakes.
Well, why? Because maybe if Tom Hall would reboot it, like with a proper
because yeah, and just do the entire thing now with updated graphics, and he could make even if the game would be like 2 or 3 times the size nowadays, it could be just one game.
I think a flat-out sequel would have worked better, because Anachronox is maybe a bit too weird to actually sell today. It was too weird to sell back then because it didn't sell well. But anyway, I wrote a review about it, and it was a terrible review. I don't remember the specifics of it, but I know it was terrible because I didn't know how to write a review. I've read reviews, had no idea how to actually write one. So I kept using all these formulas, these expressions, phrases that I kept seeing in other reviews. The stupid cliches. They make a bit more sense in our language. Stuff like, a game for big days.
Okay.
It doesn't make much sense in English, but it doesn't.
I think the English equivalent would be the blurbs that you would see on, like the anonymous blurbs that you would see on like shitty books, or or like your basics for the movie, like fantastic. This movie is a thrill ride of excitement. That sort of you're referring to those sorts of cheesy lines.
That sort of stuff. It was a crappy ass. I tried to write it and describe the game, but beyond describing it to make like people understand that this is a review, I just had no idea what the style was, how to do one. So after that, I kind of stopped doing reviews until I started working at Arena TV. Well, I got on the Arena TV forum, and we started talking about games, and we all used to describe our games and used to write about them. I think some of the stuff I wrote there may be qualified as a review, as an analysis of a game. But the first proper one I think I made was for Seven Kingdoms Conquest, which was the third game in the Seven Kingdoms series. Not the best one, far from being the best one. It was the first one I wrote that got published. Like, it got turned into a show, into a video review. And I sort of got, well, paid for it, I guess. I mean, I was already being paid for news, so that was sort of in the whole package.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, I've written a bunch of other reviews and then stopped, because, well, we'll get into that. What style of review do you like? To me, there seems to be like three main styles of review. There's the consumer-oriented review, where it's consumer first. It's one about telling the user, the customer, the client, what they're getting out of the product. It's about giving them information. The second type, I think, is the critique one, where you're giving not just feedback to the people reading it that may buy the game, but to the developers themselves. And the third one is for purely entertainment purposes. You know, stuff like ranting about a video game and presenting that as a review. Do you think there's, like, out of your head right now, are there more categories that I'm skipping, or do you think that most of them fall within these three?
No, I think I think you boiled them down quite well. I've never really put that much thought into whether or not we should have separate folders for the types of reviews. But now that you mention it, that definitely makes sense. I would the only thing that I really thought about was the differentiation between a let's call them a serious or an objective type review, and on the other hand, a comedic / subjective type review. So yeah, that would be somewhere that would be a hybrid between your second and third categories. But no, it's that's solid. That's solid.
So which ones do you prefer most? Like, what style reviews do you feel most comfortable with? So, or have you experimented with a lot of them in the past?
Well, I tried and I tried. So I was very when I started making videos. Again, this was still for movies. I was very inspired by the Spoonie experiment and the Cinema Snob, Nostalgia Critic, and Angry Joe to a certain degree. So I tried to do those comedic style, going through the movie and just riffing on it. So I enjoyed, and I still enjoy doing those, but they take a lot of motherfucking time, man. Like, an insane amount of time. The writing takes the most amount of time, because you have to watch the movie, and then when there's a joke, you need to write down the time and then write the joke and then whatnot. So I tried those and I enjoy those. I find those to be the most entertaining. But in general, when they're about bad stuff, when they're about bad movies, or so bad it's good movies and that sort of stuff. Similarly for games, when a game is, but that's for games it's a bit more difficult, because when a game is bad because it's an asset flip, then it's total shit. Then it really doesn't. It shouldn't garner any sort of attention, in my opinion. But when the game is made by a AAA company and the animation glitches and you get those wonderful what game was that? Was that one of the Assassin's Creed where you could see the eyeballs just?
Assassin's Creed Unity.
Yeah, so when you have to deal with that sort of stuff, that's when you can make the comedic / entertaining review about games as well.
It's sort of like the game calls to you to mock it a bit.
It is. In those situations, there is really, I mean, it's literally right there. If you would ignore it, then you wouldn't really be doing any semblance of a proper job, whatever you consider that job to be. And right now, for many years, what I've been doing is mostly I'm trying to do I'm trying to be objective in my reviewing. I like for whoever watches my videos to get an understanding of what the game is and what the mechanics are, how they work, if they work together properly. Or I usually talk about the various components of the games, whichever ones merit special attention. I mention those, and maybe then I will drop in with a bit of a subjectivity, because in my view, a reviews are inherently subjective. Yeah, we can talk about from an objective standpoint, we can talk about the components, but at a certain point, a piece of art, regardless if it's a movie, a game, or a song, while it's made out of the same components, will have a different impact on you than it will have on me. We'll have different interpretations of the same pile of things. So usually I'll add in a bit of a subjective thing towards the end of a review, or whilst I talk about it, because lately I'm doing gameplay videos, because I think those actually reflect the game best. So that's what I've been doing lately.
Well, you mentioned subjectivity and objectivity. I think it's probably worth mentioning too. This was like a hot topic a couple of years ago, where everybody has to be objective, no biases. Everybody has to be objective, but there's the fact that you can't be fully objective, because if you're doing it as a person, you can't separate who you are from your work most of the time. Everything you do, everything you write is sort of defined by your experiences, by your knowledge. So
it's informed. Yeah, it's definitely informed by who you are as a person, your past experiences, your knowledge, just like you're saying. Yeah, I totally agree.
And that's gonna have an impact, whether you like it or not, on what you're reviewing. Like if you've played a lot of games or seen a lot of movies in the past, and you've seen something that's in a movie now that sort of, looks like it's good and great, but you just know that somebody did it better, somebody did it a long time ago, and this is just sort of a pale copy of it, you maybe won't be as impressed. That will color your interpretation of the material that you're reviewing. Now, if you're noticing some continuity hitch here, it's because it's 2 hours later and the internet died.
My internet died. Don't take it all on don't take it all on yourself. It's mostly just me. For whatever reason, today has been a very technologically problematic day.
It has not been a good day for science.
No, sometimes, some days, just no.
So
it's just better to watch Netflix and chill.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We're talking about the fact that your previous experience will absolutely color your reaction to new media, to things you are reviewing, in a way that maybe will not be valid for some other people.
That's very true, and that's a big part of what reviewers or critics have to have. We must have a very not necessarily a massive, but a varied and quite large baggage of prior experience, prior knowledge relating to what it is that we're talking about, because otherwise we're not really reviewing anything. We're just describing the whatever it is.
Becomes more like an opinion than an actual review. So about that, what's your opinion about reviews being an opinion?
Again, it's a difficult sort of discussion, since both of us have been doing this for quite a while, and I have to say it's something I enjoy doing, because it's not like I'm getting paid for this shit. It's always been passion for me, making reviews, because I love movies, I love video games a lot, and I've seen and played both of those things, and also studied how they work, how they are made. I have an understanding of it. I've made a short movie, and I know how to edit audio, video, whatnot. So at a certain point, when you jump from just being a connoisseur to being wanting to know how the sausage is made, as the saying goes, your opinion can and is also colored by your knowledge of the process. And I've noticed this with some of my videos. When I look at some games, and I almost exclusively play indie games, as you know, and hopefully our listeners know. And I will mention that particular features or particular things in games take a lot of time and or money in order to implement, and that's why they might not be yet present in especially in early access games or in particular indie games, because we're talking about an indie company here that's maybe made out of 2 people, maybe 3, usually sometimes 1. So maybe there wasn't enough time to put in that particular animation or to add in a specific shading feature for the game to look, wow. But
you tend to have a bit more leniency for people that like work on a very small scale and try to do something.
Yes, you do, and I don't see that as a bad thing, because we mentioned that at least I mentioned that, and by us bringing up our experience, our relevant experience in the in whatever it is that we're talking about, and mentioning why exactly the thing is, I feel that we are imparting at least part of that knowledge to whomever is listening or watching or reading us, and maybe, hopefully, some of them gain a better understanding of why things are as they are.
One thing that's always a bit bugged me is the fact that a lot of reviews are sometimes just waved away as being just an opinion. I don't think that's, I don't know, just because of what you said. It's an opinion backed up by a lot of knowledge about how things work. And it's also backed up by the actual work you do. You put the work into reviewing the game, into analyzing, into understanding it.
Yeah, I sometimes feel like something of a semi-fraud when it comes to video game reviewing, because as opposed to movies, in which I have actually taken part in the process of making movies, even if it was on a very small scale. But I've written one, I directed a couple of things, editing and whatnot. So whenever I talk about movies, I not only talk about the theory behind making movies and movie making, I also talk from personal experience. On the other hand, with video games, I've never really made a video game because coding is really not my shtick. I am much more into all of the other adjacent things that relate to video games, and I sometimes feel and I consider that the best, the most honest, not the best, the most honest review or critique will be given by someone who is in the industry or who has worked in the industry, or at the very least who has at least some knowledge of some hands-on experience with the thing they're arguing or they're critiquing about. And this is an issue I have with some movie reviewers or movie critics who they only have the theory. This might have been more valid in the past, but I think they're still around. There's still a couple around who only know theory, but they have never actually had to storyboard the scene or deal with problems on the set, or notice that they're out of water or that the lighting is just completely shit or something like that, and had to deal with that. Do you see what I'm going with this? And I feel I'm a bit of a fraud in terms of the gaming part, because I haven't really done that. I have worked with game developers on the marketing side of things. That's neither here nor there. So I'm kind of, so I'm very tough on myself from that perspective.
Well, in that sense, I haven't technically finished making any games ever. I have started a lot of them. Some of them are on Steam. Well, one of them's on Steam as a mod. but I haven't made like from end to end a game that's completely playable and finished and something that I can say I'm proud of making. Just stupid stuff usually. Like my first idea for a game, I think I mentioned a few times, was to make an MMO. Of course, it wasn't an MMO. It had the ability of you playing it in single player by yourself, or jumping into basically the same world but populated by other players. So it was drop in, drop out multiplayer basically, but on a grand scale. And you could destroy anything you wanted. You could like chop down a tree and it'd be chopped down. You could tear a hole through a mountain and have angry dwarves come chasing you. I never made that thing because it was impossible and I was a bit nuts trying to make it. I just started designing it, and that's where the story for the book came from. So trying to make stupid stuff like that did give me a sort of a basic knowledge of how the idea of making a game works, how you start from the design, how you try to make it work on a technical level with the engines, the physics, the coding, lots of coding.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I feel that most, if not all, reviewers or critics should do or should have at least maybe like an internship, a sort of thing. Maybe just try their hand at actually doing the thing that they've studied and that they analyze from this sort of like passive observer type of thing, who is somehow above it all and just can see everything that's not there instead of seeing what is there, despite the problems that were there either when filming or when making the game.
Then again, it doesn't really require a lot of knowledge to notice when a game flat out isn't working or when it's absolutely horrible.
Yeah, absolutely. It does depend here on on one's standards, of course. Like I said, asset flips and whatnot. Yeah, no, those we're not talking about those. We're talking about things that have had a decent amount of time and effort and skill put into them, and for whatever reason, they might not work or might not work properly. I mean, one of our favorite, both of our favorite developers, all of the 3 games they made were extraordinarily good ideas, very good concepts, very good everything.
Buggy as hell.
But yes, incredibly buggy due to external events, because they would have wanted those games to be way better than they were. They were designed to be so much more than they actually were, but due to external influences, they were unfortunately I wanted to say shite, but they're not shite. They're great, but they have
problems.
They have so many more problems that they should have had.
Nobody sets out to make a bad game. Well,
hopefully.
I think some people at Electronic Arts may have that as a mandate. The opposite is a mandate, because I've heard horror stories from the Q&A testers for the last Medal of Honor game. The QA testing was done in Romania. And one of the QA testers basically broke the NDA and talked to a local news outlet and told them that, like a couple of months before the game was out, that they've reported so many bugs that they have been told will not be fixed.
Well, that's not necessarily something new. We always knew that. Well, in this situation, I believe we're talking about something that is like it was horrible. Basically, the level of of bugs that they were talking about was huge. But in general, and you see, this is one of the things that us as people who have been talking and interested in the industry would know that even in the long ago, when there weren't day one patches and whatnot, games would ship with a certain number of bugs in them that the developers knew about, but that they considered weren't game breaking or wouldn't happen in who knows what percentage of situations, because they wouldn't, though they would be only like very, very particular things. And yeah, games would ship with some bugs, but none of them game breaking, none of them immersion breaking necessarily. But in general, they wouldn't. You could start and finish the game.
Yeah, but sometimes developers also have the problem of getting tunnel vision because they've been working on something for so long that they understand it to the point where it becomes impossible for them to see it from the perspective of somebody that hasn't worked on it or seen it constantly over the course of several years.
Absolutely, absolutely. And
that's how we got instances like Ultima 8's constantly disappearing rocks that required patching to make it playable because it wasn't playable with the rocks normally.
From what I understood, the problem wasn't necessarily the floating rocks. The problem was the jumping system.
Well, yeah, because combined, they did not work right.
Yeah, okay. So,
and also there was the famous instance of Stardock Studios that worked for a lot of years in crunch mode with a lot of people doing a lot of things because they didn't have enough manpower on Elemental War Magic. The game came out in a very poor way, but they sort of saw it like it was good enough. They were dead tired by the end of it. They were just dead.
Yeah, and that's that might be a separate sort of episode that we might have to make at a certain point. Although
I'm saying this now because the developer at first was a bit resistant to negative criticism and reviews, saying that no, the game isn't bad, it's actually good. But when they actually had time to rest a bit and look at it, they realized, oh my god, this is a disaster. And they spent like the next 6 months patching it to a point where it was kind of playable, it was okay. And then they gave the next 2 games of that series free to everybody that bought it.
That was
and
nice
those games were good. Stardock did a lot to redeem itself in the eyes of the people that supported Elemental War Magic, like a lot of it. Like my video card, the Radeon 5750, I got it from a contest they organized to put a spell in the game. I don't think I have a credit in the game, but Shadow World, that's mine. If you see it in Elemental War Magic and what was it, Fallen Enchantress or the other one, Heroes of something, that's mine.
Aren't you cool?
Yeah, no, I'm awesome.
But I was gonna say something about maybe at a certain point we'll have to do a bit of a deeper dive in this whole crunch time culture thing. Thankfully, in the past couple of years, it hasn't been that much of a thing, or at least, it hasn't been that much because people have become more aware of it.
Yeah, it's frowned upon. It's still there to some degree because there is still no standardized workplace rule set for the gaming. There's no unions.
There's no, I know about that. And when I think we're gonna have to add to store some politically charged subject matter relating to this, and then have an episode on that one.
Yeah,
just an episode on those subjects. But let's get back to our reviewing chickens.
Big question for you. Go first.
Go.
Okay, big question for you. Have you played Metal Gear Solid 2?
I've never played any of the Metal Gear games.
Okay, the reason I'm saying is that Metal Gear Solid 2 was an immense curveball, purposefully built as a curveball to send a message. A message that pretty much nobody got, not even the reviews got, and when it was first released. Because 2 hours into the game, you're no longer playing as Solid Snake, the hero of the series. You're playing as some little guy named Raiden, who's a big fan of Solid Snake. And that sort of threw a lot of people off, especially in the reviews. But that was the point of it. You're playing as yourself in the game. Because at the end of the game, Raiden takes off his dog tags, and that's your name on it.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't like anything subtle.
Well, it was subtle at the beginning, but then it got a little bit more convoluted. Well, the Metal Gear games do get a lot of very convoluted, and sometimes it's kind of easy to lose yourself in all the dialogue because they speak about a lot of things and never shut up. so things may fall through the cracks.
And from what I understand, they also get lost in a lot of I don't know, robotic limbs and clones of
nanomachines and metallic
and the girl who breathes through her skin, so that's why she's naked. Because apparently the rest of us humans, we do not breathe through our skin at all, people.
But she would die. Like she doesn't have lungs anymore. That was the explanation. Because technically, well, you didn't burn them off, but because of you, they were burned off in the beginning of the game. Back in Metal Gear Solid 2, that wasn't as much of an issue. It wasn't as far up its own ass in terms of in-depth lore into itself. But it was more of a critique of culture, about hero worship, because near the end you get your moment of glory where you playing Raiden, that's basically meant to be yourself. You're playing with Solid Snake by your side, and Solid Snake has his bandana on, he looks all cool, and he flat out says, I have infinite ammo. Like, I have the infinite ammo cheat because the bandana, that's what it gave you in the previous game.
Okay.
So but it's never established in the game that you're in a game. It is however established that your character, you, were playing simulations with Metal Gear stories, or the previous adventures of Solid Snake. So it's kind of sort of super duper meta in a way, and not a lot of people got that. It took years for that game to be redeemed, and that's a problem that reviews have. You have to review it. When you're doing commercially, for example, you do it for a job, you have to do it fast. And you will miss things. This is a big thing that a lot of people missed.
I understand that. That's and if you do it, as a job, that is an issue. I think nowadays that's a bit less of a problem because
it still kind of is. I mean, you know the IGN thing that happened last month, right?
You're gonna have to refresh my memory.
A long-time IGN contributor was caught plagiarizing somebody else's review.
Okay. Didn't they I mean, I made a joke about something like this on the GaminGHD Discord about my Fort Triumph review because I saw a title. I'm not sure if it was from IGN or someone else. But the title basically was a description I used in my video about Fort Triumph. So I'm not sure if it was IGN, but it was dubiously. It was kind of close to exactly what I said.
Things like that tend to happen a lot. I've worked with people that have done this. One really funny instance was a friend of mine. He was just reviewing a game, half-life episode 2, on Arena TV. And there was a point where he quoted Yahtzee saying, how many times is Valve going to make us do that seesaw puzzle? And I thought, oh, he's making reference to that. That's cool. And then he called me up while he was doing the walkthrough and asked me, how do I get past the bridge? That was the seesaw puzzle. So I kind of caught him red-handed with that one. It's what happens especially when editors give you deadlines that you cannot meet, like at all. Like some people expect you to churn out reviews in a rhythm that's not sustainable. There was even an instance with Yahoo when you were reviewing The Simpsons or a Family Guy. They would not even have time to see the whole episode. They would be shown a trailer of it and then go write it. So it'll be up by the time
that's just that has to do with fucking shitty, the current type of marketing culture, as well as the attention span of most viewers and most internet users. That one is a bit more of a complicated issue. That has some interdisciplinary problems relating to it.
It's set a bit into crunch culture as well, because you have to crunch them out as fast as possible.
Than literally plagiarizing someone else's which is...
Well, to be fair, at least the guy tried to get some info about the game, because I've seen reviews written by people that didn't understand basic concept of the game. Like the fact that A Vampire Story got a really bad grade, at the 1-up because the reviewer couldn't understand that pressing space would show him all the areas that he can click on to see what he can interact with. And that same reviewer would then go on to review things for GameSpot that, let's say, they're sort of noticeably did not play. The most famous instance was Natural Selection 2. They actually pulled the review because it was so full of inaccuracies. And he's now working at Obsidian doing marketing.
See, that's kind of like what I was saying earlier, unfortunately. Yeah, well, as far as I'm concerned, I used to prefer to have. So when I made exclusively reviews, because like I said earlier, right now I'm more into making the gameplay videos because it is considerably faster. And after just starting university this week, my amount of time is considerably limited. But when I did mostly reviews, I set myself the minimum of 10 hours of playtime for a game in order for me to get as much a clear vision of what the game has to offer as possible.
Sometimes, do you ever feel that you need to finish it to have the full picture of the game before reviewing it?
No, almost never.
Me either, because I spent 70 hours in Divinity Original Sin, never finished it. In 70 hours, I know what that game's about.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not going to spend another 50 finishing it just so I can review it.
Yeah, exactly. And also, this is a thing that comes with the experience. I mean, considering the amount of games that we've played throughout the types of, we can kind of tell. It would be extremely surprising and a really weird design and development choice to have the game change, like to have everything about the game change like midway through.
Yeah, I had a bit of a paranoia with that. So when I was starting out reviewing games for Games Arena, I kept trying to play as much of them as possible, even stuff like Ares Pacific, which was a €50 game that would currently be categorized as an asset flip. This was before asset flip existed. I kept expecting, okay, maybe it gets better after this level. Maybe the island that you're flying the planes around expands. Maybe it gets more... maybe this is the tutorial. No. The game was just flat out bad, like awful. The AI would sometimes randomly crash into the island instead of attacking you for some reason.
So no, they realized that they're in a shitty game.
They committed suicide.
Exactly, AI suicide. But nowadays, not so much. 10 hours is a bit longer than I will put in 10 hours in any sort of city builder or strategy sort of game. I feel those need the time in order for you to get an actual, a pretty good understanding of how it works. Because in those situations, the game literally does change midway through. Mm-hmm. But not in terms of mechanics, but in terms of how the game core loop modifies or interacts with those mechanics. So those things do require time. But I just play like next week. I'll have a casual-ish sort of roguelike called Paper Dungeons Crawler. And it's a roguelike, it has permadeath and whatnot. So you get to see how the game works, and in my video you get to see the basic mechanics. You get to see what happens. I know I don't need to play the game for 10 hours in order to understand what happens in the game, in that particular type of game. Mm-hmm. But and I don't know I don't know how much time I actually played it. I didn't play it for long because again it wasn't required. But whenever it comes to a city builder, or a strategy type game such as Driftland, for instance, which is a bit farther back, those you do need time, because you'll usually first couple of games you'll restart a lot, because you need to see how to start the game properly, so that you can have a mid game and then the end game. And then you'll actually want to see how the game functions in the mid to end game, because there have been situations in which the game worked fine for the first, like 30 to 40% of it. But then it became apparent that there was no more, there was either no more content to be added, or they were just like in a slump of features to do later on, and things would just basically copy themselves.
Yeah, or it would just plateau and not have anything challenging or new or interesting to keep you there.
Yeah, so this sort of I think we can call it it can be akin to a sort of intuition at a certain point you develop from experience of playing these sorts of games, and what I mean. I just saw the video you made on Serious M. It's obvious that game you can pretty much tell what's gonna happen in just a couple of hours of playing the game. It's not gonna turn into a real-time strategy 15 hours in.
Serious Sam 2 may actually have done that because it's a bit of a sort of kookier game than the first ones were. Like, that game continuously kept you on edge. Like, at one time you were rolling around in a hamster ball killing people instead of shooting them because it was fun.
Yeah, but that's more of a variation on a theme. It's not, I was just talking like switching genres completely to make the point. Similar, but I wanna say something about this time investment relating to reviewing TV shows, because this is something, as you know, that I've restarted doing, and lately, most likely due to Netflix and the fact that people can and that the studios actually release entire seasons all at once, and the fact that binge watching has become a thing. I mean, this was a thing, but it was more of a niche thing, and we would use to
you
binge
have to
watch.
get torrents.
Yeah, torrents, and there was a lot. Binge watching was generally a thing that was very popular in otaku communities.
Yeah.
But since it's become mainstream now, a publisher, a studio, kind of expects you to watch the entire season. And I've noticed that you can't really you can't decide on whether or not a show is good after just watching the first 2 or 3 episodes, which is what I used to do. In the long ago, I used to watch I would give a show the first 3 episodes. If it didn't hook me in the first 3 motherfucking episodes, then I have no use to spend the time with that show.
Yeah, they're more like movies cut up into smaller bits.
Yeah, to a certain degree. Because and this was actually this sort of discovery, sort of epiphany, was more of an industry-wide thing because of the first season of BoJack Horseman. If you watch the first half of the season, the show is much more of a comedic sort of sitcom-y with a bit of a darkish kick to it. But then towards from the middle towards the end of the first season, the show not literally, but the show turns into more of a dramedy. It puts the drama before the comedy.
So it's a bit of it. Yeah, it's kind of the same situation in which Trigun is, because the beginning of it is all funny with things happening, and then it turns into a super duper serious thing.
Yeah, again, that's a pretty good analogy, but more into the Western animation sort of thing. And by the way, BoJack Horseman is it's an animation. Sure, and some people might not watch that because cartoons and whatnot, but it's definitely not for kids. It's definitely for adults, ideally maybe even middle-aged adults, to be honest. Sorry about that, my mic just went a bit topsy-turvy. And yeah, it's basically like watching any other sort of drama you would watch, the drama TV show, but with some but making use of the anthropological animals as a bit of a comedy, accelerator. So as opposed to games with TV shows now, I can't really do that much. Although, yeah, considering what I've seen, what I've watched lately, maybe in some situations I should have stopped. But whenever I do make a video about a show, even if it is as bad as Paradise PD, I much rather talk about it knowing what the entire thing is about, just to be sure, sure.
In case it throws a curveball.
Yeah, kind. In case in case it does do a BoJack Horseman, even Disenchantment, the final couple of episodes are quite a bit different than the rest of the season. So yeah, even in more recent situations, things are still worth watching the entirety. On the other hand, if you watch one episode and you don't want to watch the rest because it's shit, then by all means, do not watch the rest.
Well, in terms of the amount of time I spend with games, it really varies. Sometimes I'll try to finish them, and especially if it's a story-based game like the last game I reviewed, there was Six Mankind Divided, because it's a story-based RPG. It's about progression. It's about going from one place to another and having a point to it. And were I to just review it based on like the first half, I would say it's for the most part a good game. It has an interesting plot. It makes solution to something greater, something interesting, and then it goes nowhere after that half.
Oh, okay.
Like if I could not have the time to dedicate myself to playing it completely, I would have said it was a good game, and maybe given people a false impression that it's probably one of the best Deus Ex games ever made. When it's not, it sort of dropped the ball hard. Like not even the halfway. I would say maybe a third of the way through. Like the beginning area with Prague, with the bank, those are superb. The rest of it, not so much.
So wait, this is the first one or Human Evolution?
The Mankind Divided is the second.
The second one, okay. I only played Human Evolution and I really enjoyed Human Evolution.
Yeah, actually. Revolution was actually quite nice. This one, the beginning of it is basically Human Revolution with a few new powers. So it's a continuation, but it's well done. And then it goes nowhere from there. It's like an expansion, like a guide then to Human Revolution. The story goes nowhere. You're playing as a side story that's so uninteresting. You're wondering why you're playing it.
Yeah, and that's sad when that happens, man. Because you know there were better ideas pitched.
Yeah, but you can actually see them.
But they chose to go with the bland shit.
I think the idea was to get an expansion out with like the rest of the story or a sequel out quickly, and they can't that because all throughout the game you see, oh, Jensen, you're here. I thought you were there. What happened? I don't know. I have amnesia. And they never resolved that. They keep alluding, and then...
Did they use the writer's crutch known as amnesia?
A bit. At the end, they have a big reveal saying, aha, this happened actually. And you're like, what's going to happen next with the actual story? Because now we've been just doing side quests. Well, you're never going to know because they sort of, they said they haven't canned the series, but they kind of canned it a bit.
I hate amnesia, man. No, that's, for our listeners out there who might be wannabe writers, if your story involves amnesia, just think about it again.
I mean, if you think you can outdo Planescape Torment, go for it. But really think if you can really outdo Planescape Torment.
Otherwise, just don't. That's you can think of other things other than amnesia.
I mean, yeah, there have been good ideas with good things made with amnesia, like Planescape Torment. I think Memento had that as a core idea. I've never actually seen the movie. I've just seen memes of it.
It wasn't particular amnesia. It was just he didn't have short-term memory. So he would remember old stuff up until an accident, and then whatever happened during the day, he would forget during the night.
I swear I've seen a comedy with a guy that was supposed to testify against a mob with the exact same idea. It was made in the 80s. He couldn't remember past the day.
Could be.
That was a comedy, though. It was
Memento is also very interestingly because it's shot in reverse also. So the beginning is the end is the beginning.
So like Planescape Torment.
Chronologically speaking, when you watch it. So you can do some things, but again, that's not even in Memento. It wasn't oh, I have amnesia, I must remember what happened. It was used in a different sort of application. If the amnesia is, oh, I don't know what happened, I woke up and now I have all of these strange powers, then you need to rewrite that shit.
Yeah, The Witcher 1 sort of went in the same direction with amnesia, but then decided, you know what, we're not going to explain anything about the amnesia in this game. It's going to be about this guy being killed and you try and get revenge.
Yeah, exactly.
It worked.
I kind of remember that being a thing when I played the first one. I was like, really, guys? Really? Is this the best? Was this the narrative you chose to go with?
They gave him amnesia just so you can make your own Geralt, because they didn't want to have the strict Geralt from the books.
Yeah, which makes sense. Which from again later on from a development and game design point of view, in that situation, it made sense. And again, the amnesia wasn't the crux of the story. You weren't your goal, your quest wasn't to remember, or to find out who you were or something like that. It was just to like keep on living. Just keep living, JKL. So that was I think I should replay Witcher 1. I have the enhanced thing on GOG, so I think I should replay Witcher 1 and make a video about that, because I really enjoyed that game.
Yeah, me too. Especially, I enjoyed the atmosphere in it. I will always laud the atmosphere in it.
Yeah, I used to tell my friends back then that you could. And when was Witcher 1 released? Because this was a long fucking time ago.
2007.
In 2007, and I used to tell my friends back then that you can tell this game was made by Europeans because the town actually sounds and looks like a village in Romania or in Europe, an actual medieval style Europe, a true European medieval style town, and the music is also it's familiar to us since
it uses the kind of instruments we're more likely to hear
in popular music, popular folk music. Sorry about that, folk or traditional or even older music. So I remember that was one of the things that I truly really enjoyed about that game, and similarly about Drakensang as well. Drakensang had the atmosphere, the fantasy European thing down very well as well.
What I liked about Drakensang was that at the beginning you weren't some chosen guy that was supposed to save the world. You were just this guy's friend. He sent for you and he got killed, and you have to find out what happened.
Yeah, and I
halfway through you become the chosen one.
Hey man, that's still not the general trope.
Yeah.
Because it starts as a murder mystery, which is fucking extraordinary.
Which is one that I never saw, because it's the game's broken up into chunks of you progress through the main story, and after that bit you then progress through the side story of the finding out about murder. And I missed the last bit of finding out about murder. I never found out.
Where was I going? I had something on my mind.
Atmosphere of medieval European towns.
The atmosphere is super cool in Drakensang. I'm not exactly sure what I wanted to say. The murder mystery, by the way, this is what I want to say, is something that any DM should have at least 1 or 2 sessions. They should have a mini campaign or a mini mission that is basically just a murder mystery. And they can do whatever they want with it. They can make it like a fantastic murder, like, this ghost or ghouls or whatever the fuck that killed them, or get in some political intrigue or some human, like some backstabbing and shit like that. So that's one suggestion I have for the budding DM out there. If they want to make something that's more role play than role play, I suggest doing a nice murder mystery.
That was actually a thing in games back then, with the murder mystery and the trial. It was both in Drakensang and in Knights of the Republic, and I think Baldur's Gate. Yeah,
Neverwinter Nights did that as well.
Yeah,
and I remember that was quite a hardcore thing. I mean, it was a serious thing in the game, and you had so many choices, because you could represent yourself, or you could have one of your party represent you, who has like diplomacy and shit. And then I lost the trial, and it came down to fighting, basically like in Game of Thrones. And even then, you could fight for yourself or choose a champion. And I really enjoyed that part. That was like that was completely unexpected. That was very much like an actual tabletop experience.
Mm-hmm.